everything is energy. And just because we die doesn't mean that that energy goes away. So the trauma that you have from the past carries over into your next life. The trauma that you have from your ancestors is also now your burden.
Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality. I am so pleased to have joining me today Laura Giles, who is going to share a little bit with us about her journey and her experiences and share some wisdoms with us. Can you just let everybody know a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so my journey started when I was a little kid, actually. I was very fascinated with all things weird, occults, paranormal, and I ran across some teachings by Edgar Casey, and I really, really wanted to have a past life regression. Fortunately, I found somebody who was willing to do that for no money because I didn't have any. And that just changed the trajectory of my life. I had a really profound experience at helped me to see that as a healing modality. And then because it was a healing modality, I began to explore other ones. I eventually became a licensed clinical social worker. So I do that professionally, specifically with trauma. And I'm also a spiritual tour guide. So it's a way of blending all of those things together. I think it's a way of living from the heart. When something reaches us and we give to it, it gives back to us, and then just kind of becomes our work, I think.
Absolutely. Can you touch a little bit about how spirituality and a spiritual journey really, the intersection between that and mental health care?
Yeah, so my mom's indigenous, and I grew up with that influence. She's animist, and so am I, which is the belief that everything is sacred, alive, and connected. So spirituality can't really be separated from who we are as people. And in a lot of indigenous cultures, people believe that mental health is not actually a mental health issue, it's a spiritual issue. So
Yeah.
when you're not connected to your center, it shows up physically, it shows up mentally, it shows up as imbalance in some kind of way. So you can really tackle it from a lot of different ways. Like, for example, you could tackle depression with food and being outside in nature. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a mental health issue, although we kind of separate it out like that. It's everything is connected.
Yeah, how does it play into doing work as a social worker, working with people's traumas? Do you find that bringing spiritual elements into that is helpful for people?
Only if they're open to that.
That
I
makes
am
sense.
licensed, so I have to do best practices and I have to use techniques that are research based.
Hmm.
I don't think that that means that we can't throw in spirituality, though, because that's also best practices. So it just depends on what the person is open to and what they're willing to do, because it's not really any sort of I see it holistically. If somebody's more interested in nature therapy, if they're more interested in sound or whatever they are interested in, there's a way of addressing that that is evidence-based these days. I mean, I think science has caught up a lot in treatment modalities.
That's good to know and good
Yeah.
to hear. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable. There was a long period of time in my life where I was kind of afraid of the whole mental health care system or going to talk to somebody professionally because I was always under the impression that it wouldn't be understood. The assumption is that they would be quick to diagnose and put me on medication.
And that was true for sure. And I would have been the same way. I felt like I was in a sea all by myself. But these days, there's evidence based with plant medicine. So they're using psilocybin and ayahuasca. And if that's not legal yet where you are, it's coming. They're doing lots of research. It's on the edge of being available, and not just plant medicines, which are indigenous ways of healing, but there's all kinds of other things as well.
Yeah, I had been following some research where they had been using microdosing of
Yeah.
MDMA for a similar purpose. It's synthetic, it's not plant-based, but it's similar in the microdosing area for producing kind of a similar effect for therapy purposes.
Yeah.
It's good to know that things have expanded for people. I know that spiritual practitioners may not feel comfortable going to seek mental health care if it's viewed that they would be seen as crazy. Not,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
yeah,
used to work in a psych hospital, and that's how they were treated. I had a client who was also indigenous, and she spoke to spirits. and
Mhm.
they automatically labeled her as schizophrenic. And I'm sitting in the conference with the psychiatrist, and I'm like, look, she's from this culture. This is normal for them. And that's in the DSM too. It has to be, that's something that's not a part of your culture, because we do have cultural competence now. And he detained her against her will and medicated her against her will. I was
Um,
appalled.
yeah, that sounds awful. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine, like, based on some of the stuff that I had been experiencing growing up, like, I can only imagine what would have happened if I had been turned over. That sounds like an awful horror story to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was nothing that I could do. I just didn't have the power.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk to me a little bit about past life regressions and how that can play into traumas? I'm curious how past life experiences can play into our experiences in a current lifetime, how that can affect people.
So, yeah, I'm happy to share stories, and this is based on my observation. So, I can't say
Hmm.
that this is scientifically validated. I don't know how it could be, really. I mean, even the research that was done by Ian Stevenson from University of Virginia, where he looked at thousands of kids who had spontaneous recall of their past lives, it's not proof that we have past lives. It's only an indication, because there could be other explanations. So, I just want to put that out as a disclaimer. But my experience with it is that everything is energy. And just because we die doesn't mean that that energy goes away. So the trauma that you have from the past carries over into your next life. The trauma that you have from your ancestors is also now your burden. So if somebody doesn't clean that up, it just rolls downhill and gets bigger and get bigger, and you just keep giving it away. And past life regression is one of the ways to heal it, because it's most effective, and this is with any kind of trauma healing, to go back
Hmm.
to when the seed was planted. And if you can find that root and pull it out by the root, now it no longer exists in you, or it potentially in the whole family line. So if the trauma started with your mother, your great grandmother, 5 generations ago, it doesn't matter. Or if it happened 5 lifetimes ago, we can recall that. And so, like with the past life regression, my first one was terrible. I had somebody who was not really well trained and was not a therapist. She had the technique of how to do it, but she didn't really know what to do if you get in trouble. Now, getting in trouble
Yeah.
doesn't happen that often, but if you're that one person, you want to know that person is skilled. So I dropped into a trauma immediately, and I'm terrified. And I'm like, just like, oh, and I'm like, I'm having an abreaction and I can't breathe and I'm in a full panic mode. And she didn't know how to calm me down. She didn't know how to help me release it or anything. And it was a spiritual experience. So what I dropped into is what I was experiencing myself as, I'm not even really sure what the right word is, but as somebody with a lot of power,
Hmm.
like maybe a voodoo master or a witch or something like that.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that I saw myself doing anything evil, but I felt the energy of that person, and it was so overpowering and so scary. And it felt really dark. And because I'm very kinesthetic, I feel things more than see things. And it was just an energy that I couldn't contain. And it took about a decade for me to release that, because she couldn't do it. And I didn't really know what was going on myself. So I didn't even know how to ask for help or how to talk about it or anything. But it was so profound because I felt it in my body. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. There's something here. This is a really powerful way to help people understand themselves. And it made so much sense to me, because from a very young age, I was always attracted to the occult, and I had this fascination with it, but I was also scared of it. It was like, a push pull, and it explained so much. And I just was, I got to have more, even though that was really scary. I didn't want that to happen again, but I really needed to know more. I was just so curious about who am I and what am I carrying? What am I capable of? And that really, really helped me to figure all that out.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it sounds like that is like that can be a very overwhelming energy to suddenly be dropped into,
Yeah.
especially if you weren't, yourself really prepared for what might happen and then not knowing how to get out of it. What do you think would be some of the signs or in your experience that somebody might have something that's coming from a past life or a generational trauma. Like, how would somebody define that? Let's say if they were thinking about doing a past life regression because they think there might be something there. Like, what would some of the signs be?
Repeating patterns like not being able to find love, or getting money and then losing it, or problems with weight, anything that's over and over and over and over again, it's trying to get your attention. It's trying to say, figure this out, heal this. And when it's happening over and over and over like that, it's probably past life related, especially if you've done this and this and this and it's still not resolving. Another one is fears. Like if you are afraid of water and you don't have any experience of why, it's probably past life related. Or any kind of phobias. You're really afraid of bears. Never seen a bear in your life, but they just terrify you. Stuff like that. It's probably past life related. Or if you have strong affinities, like towards people, I just really love this person. I just met them. I don't even know them. They could be somebody that you know from a past life, or somebody that you instantly hate and have no reason for it. They could be somebody from a past life as well.
Yeah, do you think it's also like maybe things that you feel specifically drawn to, or that
Oh,
you,
yeah.
like if you have a particular passion, or even if it seems like something, sometimes people are like specifically drawn to something or really enjoy it, but it might not, it might represent an unhealthy pattern.
Yes. So, like, for example, if I really love Paris, and I'm just fascinated with Paris. I may have had a past life there. Or if I'm really fascinated with World War One, I may have had a past life there. So things like that for sure. Affinities, deja vu. I've never been to, um, I don't know, the Florida Everglades, and then I see a picture or I go there, and then my heart just like, oh, there's like a knowing, like I just love this place, or I feel really connected to this place. That could be past life stuff too.
Do you think it's safe or a good idea to lean into stuff like that if it does crop up?
I think leaning into things that scare us are always a good idea, or that draw us because there's something there for you. Now, I'm not saying it's always safe or that it's going to be a good time, but there's a reason why that energy is there. And I think it always leads to healing if you have the proper guidance and you're mentally stable enough to do it. You're prepared, those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. What sorts of resources do you think are good for people who are maybe just beginning on it and not sure how to go about that, what to look into, what to focus on about it to sort of make sure they're going about it in a safe way, or if things start to feel unsafe?
I think the best thing that people can do is contact a qualified facilitator. Everybody can do this. It's nothing mysterious. It's nothing that you have to really practice for. I think the more prepared that you are, the it can get in the way because it becomes mental then, and it's not mental. The more you try, the harder it gets, because it's like you have a brake and a gas. And so the more intellectual, the more trying you do, that's like you're hitting the brake. You're stopping it from happening. But the more you just let go and relax and let what happen happens, that's the gas, and it'll just keep going and give you more and more information. So the job of your facilitator is to make sure that it keeps going in a safe way, and that you exit in a safe way. As long as you have that facilitator there beside you, nothing horrible is going to happen. Even if you say, let's say that I stumble upon a lifetime where I'm a murderer, and I have had people do this.
Hmm.
I think that would be kind of horrible and overwhelming. But if you have that facilitator guiding you, then it's more like, okay, that happened, and now we're on the other side, versus sitting there and allowing it to overwhelm you, which is what happened to me. I'm in this energy. I don't know what's going on, and it's so strange, and it's me. It's happening in my body. I really needed a facilitator to help me through that. Instead, I just kind of got stuck in it, and that makes the trauma even bigger. So you just want somebody who knows how to navigate that process. If you have that, it's really nothing. It's like, oh, that happened.
I know there's definitely like, until I learned to be a separate observer instead of
Yeah.
being like completely energetically entwined with an experience, like that was very emotionally taxing and traumatic, whether it was like my own past life or I was working with another energy that was trying to show me something about their life. Like being being too engaged or emotionally
Yes,
intertwined with what was happening could be very emotional and traumatic.
for sure.
and learning to have that separation, like, okay, we're here to observe this situation and see what there is going on here and keep that separation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I always work with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and that 1 foot out is what pulls you out of it. And it's what grounds you and keeps you safe. So you do get a sense of what's happening, but you're always safe.
Yeah. What do you think, just from your journey overall, is your biggest takeaway to share with people, or that if you had the one thing that you wish everybody could just know, what would it be?
So many people have a fear of death. And when you do regression over and over again, which I have because of trainings and kind of going through it myself and with other people, then you die a million times. You know, you die with them, you die yourself, and you realize that it's not the end. And while the process may be scary because you're letting go of everything, it's really it's not scary at all. And I think it helps me to live more presently because I
Hmm.
know that this isn't the end. This is the only time I'll have this life, so it helps me to live this life more fully, take advantages of the situations that I have now. I'm not going to have another chance at that, but I will have another chance at life. So I'm more of a risk taker. I go for it more, and I live with a lot less fear, and that's what I really hope for people. I mean, that's what we're here to do, is to live fully and give our gifts. And if you're afraid and traumatized and shut down, you're not going to do that.
Absolutely. feel like I really resonate with that. I sometimes come across a lot of spiritual traditions that are very much about um ascending or escaping this reality or escaping life cycles, or there's that mentality out there that we're trying to eliminate earthly desires to find peace and ascend, or and that type of a thing. And that always kind of struck me as a little bit backwards. I feel like, I don't know, for me, we it's like that's not what I came down here for though. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
um I came down here to seek like desires and experiences and life. And I think that that is a really powerful takeaway for people.
Well, and two, everybody doesn't make the best choices. And sometimes we do have dark lifetimes and things happen to us. We do things to other people. And the other big takeaway from that is forgiveness and bringing it back to a space of balance because everything's not roses and sunshine, And I think it helps to have a sense of balance with that and a sense that things can be renewed and cleaned and you can start over. So that forgiveness piece, that letting go of the guilt and the shame piece, I think is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. In working with people with their traumas, do you find that the biggest piece of that is it really the events, the way they happen, or the way that we process them?
Oh, absolutely. It's the meaning that we take from it because people can get shut down for things that objectively look pretty small. So let's say that you didn't get chosen for the prom. And something like that, when you're that young, it could be devastating. And you could just say, okay, I give up. I'm not going to love anymore. And then you just completely shut that down for the rest of your life. And then, so what happens in a regression is we don't go through every single event of the life. It's like where the energy is. So it
Hmm.
skips. And then there's, you might have something significant in childhood and then maybe adolescence. Then you might go till you're 30 or 50 or your death scene. So it focuses on where that energy is and little things. When you're a kid, you're crying and you want your mom and she's got to go to work. It's not she doesn't love you. She has to provide for you. And in your little, 2-year-old heart, you're just heartbroken. Mommy doesn't love me. And there's your charge. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that I was locked away in a basement. I
Yeah.
think people think of these big things, but we all have heartaches and they leave scars on us.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because when I started doing YouTube, I was really nervous about being seen and putting myself out there and feeling really anxious. So I was doing a meditation and asked my inner child to show me why do I feel like this? And it turned out that in preschool I was painting, and I remember it now that when it came up, but I had forgotten about it completely before. But I had been painting and I made a big like Picasso mess with my painting, and I thought it was a masterpiece, but everybody was really mad at me. And so obviously the adults were just mad that I made a big mess with paint. You know what I mean? Like looking back on it, I can say, of course they were mad. You weren't where you were supposed to be. You made a big mess. Like, of course they were mad. But in that little child's heart, something I was really proud of putting out there and showing off
Yeah.
got shut down, and people were mad, right? So that energy came from something a very long time ago that I'd forgotten about. So
Hmm.
I absolutely get it. Like sometimes these things come from things that they're not that big of a deal looking back on
Yeah.
them and are easier to transmute than we might think.
Yeah. Hmm.
Is there is there any reason why you would think that maybe that doing a past life regression wouldn't be a good thing for people?
I think if you're not emotionally stable enough, that would be a reason to stay away. Because if you are not clear on what's, I'm going to say reality. I don't know if there's such a thing, but what we all agree is reality, and you're kind of confused about that. It can make that worse. There are studies that say that regression is really good for schizophrenics, and that's one of those people that, the reality is not reality. So I think if you're going to do that, you need to be with somebody who is skilled in working with schizophrenics. I am not. I would not do that.
Yeah.
But there is research that says that works. So again, I think it comes down to a skilled facilitator and being sure that they can work with what you're bringing to the table. There are a couple of populations that I have not had success with. One of them is people with diminished IQ, so 75 or below. They just don't seem to have the grasp of what's going on to follow the instructions very well.
Hmm.
People who are autistic, now autism occurs on a spectrum, but if you're excessively concrete, that doesn't work too well either because it requires your imagination and letting go of things that are concrete. And I've had people who couldn't do that. And control freaks. If you're not willing to go with the process and you got your foot on the brake and you're intellectualizing everything and saying, well, I don't feel like I'm hypnotized, and those kinds of
Yeah.
things, it's not going to work either.
Right, for sure. Yeah, if you gotta kind of have to be open to it to
Yeah,
allow it to
yeah.
happen. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Do you feel comfortable to speak a little bit on like on schizophrenia and what it is? Because I feel like it's sometimes something that's misunderstood. And I know that growing up it's like what I was afraid of
Mm.
because as clairaudient and seeing visions, hearing voices, and all of this stuff. It's what scared me. Like schizophrenia sounded like a scary word to me growing up because I think it's what I was afraid I was.
So everybody has voices in their head. That's your thinking self. So I know that when I was little, the thing was if you hear voices, you're schizophrenic. That is absolutely not true. Lots of people hear voices. Doesn't mean that you're psychic or crazy. It's just our kind of inner voice. Um, Schizophrenics have a different way of perceiving reality, and I don't know that it is crazy. It's just different. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. So there's tons of kind of niche studies on schizophrenia, and one of them is that it's a heavy metal toxicity. I can't remember which one. I think it's aluminum, but I don't quote me on that. And then once you get rid of that toxicity, the schizophrenia goes away. I think that is just like wow, all the things that can impact our brain and how we perceive reality. Heavy metals is one of them. Another thing that they're looking at with schizophrenia is that it is kind of a form of not quite psychic, or it's kind of a multidimensionality that these people are perceiving reality in a way that is not common. Kind of like autism, for a
Mhm.
while, autism was not understood, and they would just put these people in sanitariums and um, because they perceive reality in a different way. And now it's more mainstream. It's the same thing with schizophrenia in some views. So it's not like it's a mental illness. It's just that if you meet them where they are, then they start to make sense. You can communicate. And it's like for them, oh my God, somebody gets me. You make that connection, and then it seems more quote unquote normal. So I don't know that I know schizophrenia has like the worst connotations in mental health. Like these people are just untreatable. You can't do anything with that. But that's not true either. Some schizophrenics can be cured. So that was a revelation to me. I didn't know that. I thought that once you have it, that's it for you. There's no hope for you. But that is not true either. And I can't remember the percentage, but it's a lot higher than you would think.
That feels like relieving and good to
Yeah.
know. I do feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about it out there, and a lot of things that get classified as mentally ill when maybe that's not necessarily what's going on. And I
Yeah.
appreciate the point of view that just because some people see reality in a different way or interact with reality differently doesn't necessarily make them broken or that there's something wrong with seeing things differently. That feels really validating, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the shaman in indigenous cultures, they absolutely had a different way of perceiving reality, but they were not marginalized or shut away. They were given a place to use that, and they did use that for healing. So I think it is a gift. Everybody has a gift if you learn how to view it and hone it and use it for the betterment of all people.
Absolutely. Do you know of any studies where they've done that with, like, just people who observe reality differently, whether that's autistic or schizophrenic, and just actually talked to them and listened to the things that they're saying and seeing what's coming, like a different point of view of reality and what's coming out of that?
Yes, there is a guy who did studies on that. I can't remember his name, but he
Yeah.
wrote several books on it, and his work was absolutely miraculous because his way of looking at it was different. He was able to connect with them on a way where they could connect and they could dialogue, and they showed him a very different and beautiful view of the world, and because they felt seen and heard, then some of the stuff that they do, the ways that they present, not all schizophrenics are the same, but let's say that they're head banging or screaming or talking to people that we don't see, those
Hmm.
kinds of things, those symptoms stopped. So it's a way of coping with not being seen and heard. It's like I'm talking a different language. Nobody's understanding me. How can I get my point across? And then they come up with these coping skills that look really, really odd. But all of our coping skills are really odd. If you think about, if you intellectualize, what is the problem? So the problem's I'm not being seen or heard. Okay, how are you dealing with this? Well, I'm ranting and raving, or I'm cutting myself, or I'm attacking people. None of those things logically make sense, but we do
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
So with schizophrenics, they just have a different coping mechanism.
Yeah, that's fascinating. If you come across it, let me know. I'll link it in the description for
Yeah.
people to check out. And I would be fascinated to check it out for myself as well, because I do think there's something to that. I've wondered about it with Alzheimer's as well. Like as people are like shifting in between timelines, like I'd be curious to know what if there was anything like that for that as well. Like
For
what.
sure. So with Alzheimer's, there is definitely an aluminum link. So heavy metals is
Hmm.
aluminum. There's also a cholesterol link. So people that have enough, most of the brain is made out of cholesterol. And when you have low cholesterol, then the likelihood of Alzheimer is much higher. So there's all kinds of health reasons for that,
Hmm.
environmental reasons for that. With the different types of dementia, there's lots of links to vitamin deficiencies as well. I can't remember which one of the Bs, but one of the Bs is
Hmm.
implicated in dementia. So it doesn't necessarily mean, well, this is just a natural part of aging, or it doesn't necessarily mean this person is crazy. On a spiritual side, the cause for dementia and Alzheimer's is I don't want to remember. So there's an energetic link to it as well. So when you're working holistically, you look at all of these things. And this is what I mean, you don't necessarily have to tackle things by the tool that you have. There's many different ways to the same destination, and I think all of them can be good.
For sure. You have a podcast that you do, Paranormal PTSD, and I was looking in your link in your bio a little bit about working with people who have paranormal PTSD. Can you speak on that a little bit for me?
Yes, it's interesting that I have come across a lot of people during my time as a therapist who that's the cause. That's the cause of their issue. And usually people don't come out and say, I've been visited by aliens ever since I was 6 years old. They say
Yeah.
something else and then they might work up to it later. But it's becoming more and more common. People are having these experiences and they're more willing to say, this is what happened. And whether it's real or not, so I believe everybody has the experience they say they're having. Now,
Yeah.
it might not be objectively what they think it is. The cause might not be what they think it is, but I believe that they had the experience they say they're having. And the effect is the same because we're biologically wired to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn when something's overwhelming. That's there to protect us. And so it
Hmm.
doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot or an alien or is your little brother trying to scare you? That's going to happen.
Hmm.
And You have to be able to talk about it in order to heal. So the podcast is really there because there's just so many more people that are experiencing these things that they can't explain. And it's there to help them know that they're not alone and they don't have to deal with this. They can heal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fantastic work to be doing. I know personally, like I wish that there had been more resources when I was growing up and going
Yeah.
through things and felt like I was a crazy person and had nobody to talk to about it and just didn't know what to do. And I think that the rise of the internet and people opening up and putting more information out there, being willing to share their stories is a huge benefit to everyone and kind of helps everybody open up about the kinds of experiences that they've had.
Yeah. We live in a multi-dimensional universe and
Hmm.
people see things, if I don't think it's uncommon to say, oh, my dead dad came and visited me. That's a little bit easier to talk about because people do share those stories. But when it's something else, something bizarre, something you can't even name, that's the ones that we keep to ourselves. And those are the stories that start with, I've never told anybody this before, but, and those are the stories that need to be told because you're not alone. And as soon as you start posting your story, 10 people will say, oh my God, me too, and we
Yeah.
won't ever know that if they don't share the story.
Yeah, it takes people being able to come forward and talk about it, to give everybody some permission to talk about it and
Yes,
open up about it. So it makes it for a more comfortable environment for everybody. And I
absolutely.
and I really think that work is so important. It's like what I hope to do with putting information out there and creating a safe space for spiritual people to talk about their journeys. And I appreciate your show and the work you are doing. I think it matters so much to have safe spaces to speak about these kinds of
Yeah.
things.
Thank you.
For sure. Do you want to let people know where they can find you?
Sure. So my main website is lauragiles.net. There's a link tree too. That has all my links on it, and I don't know that. I think it's linktree.lauragiles. I
I'll
hope
put
that's
it
it.
in I'll post it in the description so people can just click on it
Okay.
and check it out.
Thanks.
And then the podcast streams on all platforms or
Yes. Uh-huh.
awesome. And that's Paranormal PTSD. It's a great show. It was fun to do that with you, and I appreciate you coming here to talk to me a little bit about things.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for being here and listening. Like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff. Check out Laura at her links, and we will see you guys next time on Spirituality.